What is going on, everybody? Welcome in. It's not the pregame show, but we got a show for you. Still working on some names for you guys, but for now, we'll just call it the off-season show. Still going to come to you every Friday with the latest news, stuff like that. So don't tune out just because it's not football season. We still got basketball season, still have baseball season on the horizon. Both men's and women's basketball teams are still undefeated. And with baseball coming around the corner this spring, we'll see what it does there. So don't just leave us. We will always have updated news, whether it's football, basketball, or baseball. You will see us on Fridays. We're going to be trying to give you something else also during the week, whether that be some just interviews with recruits, whether that be interviews with former players, whether it be basketball, football, baseball. We will get you some content because if there's any fan base that deserves some good content, it's this one right here. Welcome in. I hope you have had as good of a week as you can with all the portal news, with the end of the season, no bowl game, stuff like that. However, at least you woke up this morning knowing your women's team is still undefeated. Even after a sluggish start offensively, they found a way to get it done. Bravo to them. You got to love a team that never gives up. But three things we're going to hit on today. Going to hit on some NIL. Kind of gonna talk how it just affects the landscape of college football, but not only college football, high school football. I know some of you probably don't care about that, but you should, and I'm gonna tell you why. We're also gonna talk about the coaching changes. I know you're all anticipating some kind of coaching change. Why isn't there one yet? I think I have an answer for you. And then we're gonna talk portal. What do you as a fan base need, or not necessarily a fan base, what does your football team need? What does the South Carolina Gamecocks need to be able to compete for a 6-win season at minimum? And why do I say 6 season win at minimum? Because I think that's what this staff has to do. Again, welcome in. Let's get started. Thank you for all the support. Continue to like, subscribe, and comment. Let's get on with it. Let's just drive straight into this NIL thing. And I have a take about NIL, and I don't think it's controversial. I think a lot of people feel this way. I think the athletes deserve money to be paid off of their name, their image, and their likeness. The whole point of NIL to begin with was for them to be able to make money, to have these type of partnerships, sign autographs, get paid, do whatever they do to get paid in terms of making their name or making money off their name, image, and their likeness. However, NIL is not that anymore. You have football teams offering $8 million for kids that have not played a down in college football. Doesn't make any sense. I'm all for getting these players played, getting these players paid. And they should. They deserve it. The NCAA has been greedy for an extended period of time, but now that greed has kind of turned hands. And if there's any athlete that watches this, I'm not telling you shouldn't get paid. You 1,000% should. But let's talk about the effect this has, that not only with the NIL affecting fan bases won't support it or not support it, but now it's starting to affect the portal. We've got people entering in 3 teams or going to 3 teams in 3 years specifically because of NIL. You've got players leaving teams like Bama, like Georgia, like Clemson, like Ohio State, just to go somewhere else because the bag is bigger. Not because the school they're transferring is winning. Rarely is because of that. It's because the bag is bigger. And if by all means that is the priority, let it be the priority for you. However, what's going to wind up happening is this, and it's going to happen sooner rather than later if the trend continues. And I think Columbia, South Carolina is seeing this right now. You're not going to have fan bases that are willing to give not only their time and effort, but their hard-earned money to say, hey, here's $500,000. Bye. Thanks for coming. In a year. So now we've gotten to this place where now we're slowly starting to see a huge divide between the athlete and the fan base. And former players like Savell Newton, and I'm sure if he sees this, I mean nothing but disrespect to him, but to disrespect the fans as he did in a tweet that he put out the other day saying, miss me with that loyal stuff. The wrong fan base to say that to is the University of South Carolina. You could not have said that to a more worse, or you could not have picked out a fan base to describe loyalty to. Like, you just couldn't have picked the worst one. They are loyal. I just saw a jam-packed Williams-Brice Stadium after the head coach called out the student section, and by golly, they were there the whole game. They were loud the whole game for a football team that had won 5 games, 5-6 at the particular time. So I don't want to hear anything about loyalty. They've shown up. They might be loud at times. They might be loudly wrong at times as well. But it's for a fan base that just wants a 6-win season at minimum. At minimum. So now we're seeing this divide where players don't, not all players, and it's not all fans. I'm not generalizing anyone here. And I don't think Savell Newton was generalizing a whole group of fans either. But again, context matters, and that context wasn't in there, right? But it's here right now. I'm not saying all players, and I'm not saying all fans, because you have the DeCarrion Joyners. You have the Xavier Legettes. You even have the Spencer Rattlers. Spencer Rattler, he got his NIL, but he didn't hop around to a different program every time the bag got bigger. But now we also have the players that don't play or not giving their best, and then they leave after fans donated this money to them. So I get both sides of it. There's 2 sides of a coin that is going to wind up being uglier sooner rather than later. At what point do you draw a line as a conference, as the NCAA, as someone, and say, well, we have a problem on our hands? This is going to get to the point where the fans aren't going to support you anymore in NIL. And so then now what do you do? Because, see, here's the issue. The issue isn't that it's just happening to teams like South Carolina. The issue is this won't be fixed until Florida State starts losing teams or losing kids because of this, until Miami starts losing kids because of this, until Texas, until Southern California. For the teams that are spending money, which we'll talk about them not developing talent another day, until the teams that are spending money start losing players because of it, it's not going to matter. That's where your problem lies. This is an issue that cannot and will not be fixed until it gets uglier than what it is. And unfortunately, Columbia, South Carolina is seeing that at its fullest right now. But let's talk about the portal, because, I mean, that kind of goes in and translates to the NIL issues. For me, as a university, your football program, I put out this tweet the other day. I thought running back was the most important, not because you didn't have one deep, because, and again, at that particular time, I didn't know if Mario was coming back. Still don't know if Mario is coming back. It wasn't your one deep anywhere. I think you have good enough one deep talent to compete. I think the depth is what you need to build. It's why I think this recruiting class is so important to keep it intact. Maybe add 1 or 2 players that you're like, didn't know we could get them, but you got them. But with this portal class, I think you have to go get at least 2 running backs, especially if Mario's leaving. You might argue a third, depending on if you can pull a guy like Daniel Hill in. But you need depth there. What you can't afford is to go another 3 games towards the end of the season. I think it was 3, with only 2 scholarship running backs. You need to be able to give those guys a breather. You need to be able to give those guys breaks and allow them to play on downs and distances and scenarios that benefit them and what they are good at. Nothing against Braswell and his pass blocking, because he showed you in the most crucial time against Kentucky, he can pass block. But he's more of a guy that needs to be getting out on the edge, catching the football out in space and going and making plays, not necessarily sitting inside of the box. The second one I put as receiver, and with the rumors going around with Juice Wells potentially leaving, with rumors of other receivers potentially leaving, you definitely need to hit the portal. You need to hit the portal hard. You've got good talent coming into Mazio. I think he's a heck of an athlete, and he will be able to go ahead and contribute the second he steps foot in Columbia, South Carolina. What I'm curious with is what type of receiver do you go and get? Because, and hear me out here, your play calling, in my opinion, on the offensive side of the ball is about to change. It won't be ran like it was last year because now you have a guy in Sellers where his feet have to be used as a weapon. So I think you're going to shift to a whole lot more of an RPO style offense where Sellers' legs is used at minimum 6, 7, 8 times a game. And that's designed plays. That's not Sellers improvising because a read's not there. So what type of receivers do you need for that? You need receivers that can create space, and you need receivers that can create in the open field when they get the ball. So while you do need that 6'3", 6'4" dude that's going to go up and make a play, you need Harbor to come into his own. You need Omega Blake to stay and come into his own. Go get you one of those true X receivers, one of those dudes. Outside of that, I think you need to bring in those guys that can make someone miss, can create separation because of their speed. That's what you need. So I think you need 2 or 3 portal guys there at the receiver position, but you definitely need people that can miss. The next one for me was more of the defensive line. Now, again, depth here, but depending on who all returns, you might need a good starter too. For me, the biggest thing about the defensive line was more of you got pressure this year, and you did. It was tremendously better than last year. However, your issues you ran into was you weren't able to finish. So I would prefer more edge guys, and I would love for Dylan Stewart to have some help out there where you're not just relying on a true freshman to come out there and make a play every single down, because it's extremely hard to come into the SEC as an edge rusher and compete on every single down. It is. Allow him to come in on third downs. Allow him to come in on obvious passing downs and do what he's good at, and that's get after the quarterback, right? The next one was offensive line. And I think I'm going to switch that up now, especially since it sounded like your starting DBs are gone. And because of the lack of rotation you had this year on the defensive side, you may need to go get an experienced defensive back. So I might put defensive back. I might even slide them up to 3, but I'm leaving them at 4 and leave it there and do that. And then offensive line at 5, I still think you need quality depth. I would not mind a starting interior offensive lineman. More so a true center. I think that's what you need, is a true center. Not someone that just happens to be able to play center, but a true center. So that's where we're at with NIL and portal. Now let's talk about these coaches. I understand, just like everyone has talked about before, I'm not telling you anything that you don't know. You, as a fan base, want change at the coaching or in the coaching staff. And I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying there shouldn't be changes. There should be. But here's why I think you haven't seen any changes yet. This is the most important offseason. It's not something we haven't told you here on this channel for the past 5 or 6 weeks. It's the most important offseason for Shane Beamer. Whatever changes he's going to make, it can't be a change just to make a change. Because if you do that, you risk running into the same problem you're in next year. So as a fan base, I get it. I get the frustration of let's make some kind of change and let's make it right now because we want it and we deserve it. I hear you, but you need your head coach to make the right decisions. And while he hasn't hit on every single one of them his first 3 years as a head coach, this is why this offseason is the most important. He's got to get upgrades. If there isn't a significant upgrade at that position or at the positional coaches or at the coordinator level, then you don't need to hire anybody. And I know that's frustrating seeing that from the fans' perspective, and I get it. But from a CEO, as a coaching perspective, you have to make the right hire. So there's no point in getting rid of someone just to get rid of them. You need to have an upgrade. Now, what I'm not telling you is there aren't upgrades out there. But because of how the portal is, you can ill afford to try to recruit not only the portal, but keep your recruiting class intact without a full staff. So for me, if I had to guess, I'm not inside of that building, I don't know. If I had to guess, you're going to see changes. I would argue at minimum 2 changes, you might get up to 4. Might get up to 4. But I also think you're going to have that replacement almost nearly in place before you hear any news, because this is something that the portal guys are going to need to know and the recruits are going to need to know, because the last thing you can do is afford to lose recruits because of a change. You have to make sure that you can keep that class intact as much as possible. So as frustrated as you are, I get it. You need to be patient because your head coach has to make an upgrade in hires. I think there are upgrades at certain positional groups. We're not here to call out those groups. And I think there's a potential for a significant upgrade elsewhere as well. But give it time. Give him a chance to make the correct hire. If we go through this offseason and there are no changes made, then we can have a different talk. But don't worry about it now, because every other college is making changes. Every other college is not sitting in the same scenario as the University of South Carolina is. This is a first-time head coach going into his 4th season and his most important offseason. He's never had to go and do this consistently. This is something he's still learning at, and as frustrating as it is for the fans, it's something you have got to be patient with, because the last thing you want him to do is rush a decision, and we'd be right back here next year wondering why the same time next year we still haven't made staff changes. So while the NIL, while the portal, and while the coaching changes are not what you want them to be, remember, with bad news, there's at least some kind of good news that's going to come out of this. What is it? I don't know. We'll see. You might pick up a recruit you didn't think you were going to pick up. You might pick up a portal guy that is a huge portal guy. You might get rid of a coach and upgrade and have a big upgrade. You never know. While it's not the easiest to get to adjust to at this particular time, you got to do it. And while you do it, why don't you watch the men's basketball game tonight? Why don't you support the basketball teams, both men's and women's? Because they're still currently undefeated. And let's let all this play out, and then we'll talk about it as it play out. But until then, I will see you next Friday. Again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for the love and support. Thank you so much for putting up with me not being able to speak English today. We will see y'all next Friday. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.